average. For every $100 you spend at a local store, 45 of it remains in the community.
Looking at the camera.
All right, we're back. My name is Robert Winters, and I'm here and this is Cambridge Inside Out, and I'm here with my lovely co-host.
Oh, Susanna Sagat. And we have a special guest.
And I am John Howard, president of the Porter Square Neighborhood Association.
And if you were here 3 minutes ago, you may remember John, or else the fellow who looked just like him who was here not so long ago.
All right.
And we are taking calls. This is your opportunity to ask John any question you want.
Or any of us, just in case.
Yeah,
but
617-876-0055.
So we can
So
do
the
that.
Porter Square Neighborhood Association is in the Porter Square neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other neighborhood associations that you work with?
Well, we cooperate quite a bit with the Agassiz, the Baldwin community, I think that's called now, the Ag Neighborhood Council. And we actually have developed a fairly cooperative relationship with the North Cambridge Stabilization Committee. They're very, very different in style from us, and
That's an understatement.
and have had in the past a fairly toxic relationship with the city.
Right.
But in fact, there are often times when we look at a particular issue that they're interested in, we actually see eye to eye on it.
Sure.
in many ways. So I exchange information with them all the time when there's something happening. So yes, we cooperate with them. We also have PSNA we're not just divided up between Cambridge neighborhoods. We have Somerville on the other side of the Porter Square, and we have members from Somerville too. So we even know some of their selectmen or whatever they call them.
That's pretty good.
And we occasionally talk with them. And of course, the political focus in Somerville being the way it is extremely different.
Yeah.
In the previous segment, we were talking about the redesign of the intersection. That had a lot of impact on Somerville. And in fact, at one time, when in the middle of the committee meetings, Mike Capuano showed up and basically said, if you can't figure out a way to make that left turn happen, you're in big trouble with me. Unfortunately, we did, so we never found out what that would have meant.
Well, is that why we now have Markey instead of Capuano?
No, I don't.
Was this when Mike was mayor, or
when he was mayor?
Congressman?
Oh, all
This
right.
was when he was mayor.
Oh, and being mayor of Somerville, that's not a passive job.
That's right. That's a very active job.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
good you have two cities.
So we try to, and as I said, we have a few members, not a huge number, but a few members, and some of our actually good, strong, long-term members they're from Somerville. You might know, if you look at the map, that White Street is in Cambridge, but the houses on it are in Somerville.
Yeah.
So those people, they get some services from Cambridge, even though they're Somerville residents. So
Well,
they're concerned about that.
now the shopping center, is that part in Cambridge, part in Somerville?
No, the shopping center is entirely in
Cambridge?
Cambridge.
Okay.
And the boundary line, again, it's weird. It sort of runs down the middle of the sidewalk on Elm Street. So,
Now this.
so to the point where there are places on the sidewalk where it's not clear which city should shovel it, and so neither one of them does it.
Now there are two streets in Cambridge called Elm Street.
Really?
Yeah, and according to Glenn Kuchar, the real townies of Cambridge know how to say them differently.
How do you say them?
Well,
And where are they?
see, this is how you can tell a true Cantabrigian.
Okay.
The one is the Elm Street that's up on the other side of the shopping center that goes up to Davis Square, and the other one is the Elm Street that's down by Tremont, Norfolk, and Elm Street.
You just said them the same.
Well, I did because, you see, I have to confess, I'm not really a true Cantabrigian.
Okay, John.
Okay.
Pressure's on. You know
No,
how to pronounce it?
I was born here, but believe you me, I was not raised here. I didn't go to high school, so I can't.
I'll give away the answer right now, but
All right.
I actually tested this by grabbing this old guy named Charlie who lived over there, like on Norfolk Street. I said, how do you say the name of that street over there? And the one up in Davis is Elm Street, and the one over here is Elm.
Elm Street.
Right? Now, if you're from a native Cantabrigian and you disagree, please call 617-876-0055 and tell me to go back to New York.
See, you thought this show was.
And when you're done with that, you can tell me how to
Worthwhile.
pronounce alewife.
Alewife? I've always said
Alewife.
alewife. Am I wrong?
What is it?
There are, if you find some good old natives, a lot of them say alewife.
This is your chance to call in and tell us.
Okay.
Well, a lot of people over in Riverside, they call it Putman Street too.
Mhm.
They don't say Putnam, they say Putman.
Well,
Yeah, they'll spell it correctly, but they will say Putman.
Huh.
I absolutely will. And I remember Al Vellucci, speaking of, I think when Dennis Carlone was on, we were joking about this the other day, a few weeks back, when Al Vellucci used to make a point of saying that Lechmere, that's supposed to be pronounced Lechmer.
Oh, is it?
Well, I don't know. I think if you were British or something, you might say.
How did he say Worcester? Worcester.
I don't know. I don't think I ever asked him that.
Like Mare. Like,
By the way, I want to just express a debt of gratitude. It was Paul Myers, former president of the Porter Square Neighborhood Association, back in, I think maybe it was about 1998, he actually did me a great service, which is that I had started writing this little newsletter, email newsletter called Cambridge Civic Journal back then. It was distributed via email, and I print copies and did all of that. And Paul Myers contacted me and says, would you mind if I took that and put it on a webpage?
Uh-huh.
And he
For
did,
you.
for me. So he said, so I used to direct people to the Porter Square Neighborhood Association, where that was the original host of the Cambridge Civic Journal, because, he just said, well, he knew how to do that stuff. I had no idea. And then I think within a year, I said, well, this is kind of crazy. I'm depending on other people to do this stuff for me, so I should learn how to do this myself. So I was at Harvard at the time, and so I moved it on to the Harvard math department, because I wanted to teach myself how to make web pages.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually it became rwinters.com. But I don't know that I ever would have thought about putting it on a website, except for Paul Myers said, do you mind if I do it? I think by now I would have come around, sure. But that's, historically, people say, oh, yours was the first civic website in the universe. And I said, well, you can thank Paul Myers for that, actually.
good.
Thank you.
I owe him a debt. Did he head off to the West Coast or somewhere? What
I've
became
lost track
Paul?
of him. He moved to Colorado for a year. I think there was a sabbatical involved or something like that. Then came back here, but didn't move back to Porter Square. I think moved to Boston. And after that,
see.
I've lost track of him.
I see. Yeah,
And he was a very effective president.
very, very much. And he set at least from our perspective, when we were working with the Central Square Group, really set a good tone. As for, cooperative neighborhood associations, which I think is
Right.
just generally the right way to go.
Yeah.
So, let's see. So what's the hot topics right now for Porter Square?
Well, of course, development is back on the agenda all over the place. We have
Mainly housing development, right?
Well, but that's where the developers all are doing now.
Yeah, that's-
10 years ago they were all building condos. Now they're still building housing, but it seems to be rental
Rentals
now.
where the money is. Yeah.
Rentals where the money is. And it all stopped for a while because the economy being down. But right at the moment, we've got the St. James's Church thing. We've got the Kaya restaurant being turned into a hotel.
That was approved a few years ago, but then kind of
Wait,
held
go
off.
slow here. The St.
Okay.
James what?
So St. James Episcopal Church at the
Yep.
corner of Beach and Mass Ave. That's a developer had bought the car wash, wanted to put a condo there, then entered into negotiations with the church to take a little bit of their land because they
This
needed
is
more
Oak
width.
Tree? Oak Tree?
This is Oak Tree,
Yeah.
right, Oak Tree Development. And then struck a big deal to completely replace their parish house with much larger condo building, and they wind up being condominium owners, participants in the condominium, and having the whole ground floor, which would be their new parish house.
All right.
And that's a very complicated financial deal, and it has not gone well for the developers or the neighborhood, and is currently stalled and in the courts. But the Kaya Hotel is coming. The ancient Roy Rogers later Everoff restaurant has been
I remember that.
demolished,
Yeah.
and we're waiting to see what goes up there.
And that's going to be a hotel?
That is going to be a hotel. The owner is Mr. Kim, the Korean fellow, still goes back to Korea every year. And he's building an Oriental style hotel, sort of the kind of thing you'd expect to see, I guess, in Korea or Japan, which will mean that the rooms will be very small, but the prices will be somewhat under control. And I think his planned clientele is parents of international
That's
students.
smart.
Yeah.
And it's, it's close to the transit. It's, I think, a
It's
great
right by
place.
the train station, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's very, it's a block away,
Yeah.
right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
So that's definitely coming. The Art Institute of Boston, or whole Leslie thing, it's got a new name,
That's
by
the old
way.
Sears building.
That's just south of the old Sears building.
Right.
Is this? They just moved. They
Well,
just
the Art
moved the
Institute of
church.
Boston
That's
took
a new
over the
building.
Sears building.
No, Leslie
no.
took over the Sears building.
AIB is a part of Leslie now.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
But there's classes there for.
They are currently, they are currently teaching some of their classes in the Sears building, but the intent is to have a whole separate new building for
Right,
the art
right.
Okay,
thing. Right.
that's across the street.
That's where the church is, right, has just been moved away from, so that building could go there, but the new location of the church will be part of the AIB complex. So that's a big deal.
So
and
not a
it's going
church
along right.
anymore.
Well, and there's a item on
If you've
the-
looked inside of it and walked past it, it is a shell. It is really, truly a shell,
And the
completely hollow.
daycare center's gone and.
The daycare center went quite a while ago. There was some negotiation with the neighbors over that, and people were sad to see it go, but I think they actually found a pretty good home. Just wasn't in the same place.
Now, there's also something coming up
There's two
across
more.
the street, at least.
There are at least there are three more major projects that are in the works. The one that crossed the street is what was the old White Hen Pantry, and now it's called, I believe, the Gourmet
yeah.
Kitchen. There is a developer who owns that already. He wants to demolish that and put up a residence building.
Does that include that whole parking lot?
And he's asking for a special permit. He actually showed us plans, or showed somebody plans for this about 4 years ago.
I remember that.
And it included taking up most of the lot with building, and because of parking requirements, he had to do something special about parking, and so he wound up applying for car lifts, sort of like you would find in Europe, where, little car elevators, you lift your car up in the second, up above the other ones, in back of that building. And so he's looking for permission to do that. I assume he's still planning to do that. I haven't seen the new plans.
Now, is that
But
the
that,
whole block?
the neighbors are going to be upset because of the potential for noise, I would think, on that one.
So it's the little convenience store, a little parking lot, and then there's like a.
Then there are
what's-
two great big parking lots which are associated with the old Sears building.
And
and
that's
Leslie owns
part of
them.
this project
That is
too?
not part of that.
Okay.
Those are Leslie's buildings.
You're talking
and
about
They're
the
staying there.
lots
Right
behind?
next to, right,
the one
going,
that- No, I'm talking
down
about the
Mass Ave.
lot across Mass Ave from the Sears building.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
There are two lots there. One
And they're
was dedicated to what was Bally's, or the
Right.
fitness place, and the other one is just I think just sort of employee or whatever parking for Leslie. It's Leslie's property. It's part of their long-term plan, but they've used all their money on other projects, and so they're not doing anything with that now. I would expect that someday they'll be back and wanting to put something there. Anyway, then there's still two more. The Bob Slate building, where Bob Slate's was before they closed. Another developer has
which is
bought
north of the
that.
post office, right?
This is north of, yes, it's just across the street from the post office. And the developer there has bought that and wants to put, guess what? Another residence building,
Right.
ground floor retail, 3 stories of apartments, maximum height, of 54 9/10 feet, and
What
I
is
forget-
that is the 55 foot, is that the limit in that district?
basically along almost all of Mass Ave, it's 55
But
feet.
typically you find, like I know in Central Square, you can build a certain height as of right. I think in Central Square it's 60, but then you apply for a special permit because it's sort of the soft limit is more like 80
Oh,
in
really?
Central Square. But you have to, once you do that, you go through a special permit process, so you have to meet various other conditions.
None of the developers to date have applied to go over 55 feet.
All right, all right.
A
Well, I
large,
don't- I
a
don't-
large part of the battle over the St. James's Oak Tree project actually was 55 feet, and I think we've eventually talked them down to 49 feet or something.
Well, the Porter Square, do they have Central Square has an overlay district
Right.
which is what specified some of these special permit conditions for allowing certain things
Mhm.
and not other things. But does Porter Square have an overlay district associated with it, or is it just straight
It's a li-
zoning?
No, there is of course a business zoning district, which includes the shopping center and a
Yeah,
little bit
oh,
of the
yeah.
area around it. But most of Mass Ave from the Cambridge Common north is is zoned 100 feet on each side of Mass Ave for business and mixed business and residential
Right.
purposes with a 55-foot limit.
All right, and so
Almost all of it. In addition, there is an overlay district along Mass Ave, again, I think from somewhere in the Cambridge Common up to the Arlington line, which specifies things like the properties of the buildings, like the finish, like you can't have a facade that is 100% glass, but it does
Right.
have to be at least 50% glass or something like this. They have to, the doors for the businesses have to open on the open onto the sidewalk. You cannot put the building on stilts and park under it. And if you read those three things, then think about the glass building that's across the street from Beach Street hits Mass Ave,
right.
and it's.
The old-
I've been told.
The old funeral home?
No,
No,
we
straight
haven't come to that one yet.
Okay.
This is across Mass Ave, on the south side of Mass Ave.
Okay.
That shiny glass building was the impetus for this overlay
Right.
district, because
Yeah.
it bans everything that shiny glass building has. That building is an abomination. And it just absolutely doesn't.
There is a bit of a history of zoning laws or overlay districts being crafted in response to crises.
Right.
I think in in mid-Cambridge, once upon a time, they formed this thing called the townhouse ordinance, because what was happening there were these old classic buildings that had big lots. People were just tearing them down and putting up these boxes. And people said, well, that's terrible, that's terrible. We kind of like the fact that some housing come in here, but you're destroying these beautiful old buildings. So they created a mechanism through zoning so that you could actually do these sort of infill projects. So condos started sprouting up in backyards, but the old mansard roof front buildings all stayed.
You're
And-
describing my house.
Is that right?
Yeah, exactly my house. Mansard front, two condos in what was once the backyard.
That's right. So, but the alternative, and because people can still buy properties and build on it, was that people were just tearing down all the old structures. And so, even if things are a little more dense, I think it's still preferable to what the alternative might have been.
Yeah. So at any rate, so I've talked about the glass building, and that was the overlay district. Let me go
Right.
back to the other two projects, so I would sort of like to go through those.
Sure.
So anyway, so the Bob Slate building, as I said, it's the one that's next to the post office.
Yep.
And that's a fairly large number
It
of
has a
units.
Japanese market in there now, right?
They have closed. The owners had put all of the tenants on short-term leases and are telling them that this building is not going to be here anymore.
Got
In a
it.
year, as soon as we can get our permits, we're gonna demolish this building and build a new one. And, when we're done, there will be ground floor retail, and maybe you'd like to come
course.
back. But the owners of the Japanese market said, listen, we put in a lot of effort in remodeling this space, and we put in a kitchen and so on, and now we're being told to get out. We're not gonna come back, period. So they've closed, and I don't know whether they've opened anywhere else. It's a shame. But anyway, so there's they had a very short-term lease with a mattress store, the sleep store, something like this, and they had they still have a cell phone store, say AT&T cell phone store in there. My impression with cell phone stores is they can be moved in and out in 2 days. So,
I think we need more.
they really tolerate
Yeah,
short-term
Don't you-
leases.
I think we need a few more cell phone stores and banks around Cambridge, don't you think?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have one on every block yet. There's still one or two blocks that don't have them.
Really, that was the thing. We had great plans around Central Square, and then as soon as some buildings were
Yeah.
constructed, people said, "Well, these people are willing to sign long-term leases." So,
Yeah.
boom, banks and phone stores.
Yeah. At any rate, so that building, their remaining tenants could be gone at any moment. Then the building would come down, and it'd probably be an 18-month or a 16-month project to put the new building up. That is not a building that is so large as it requires a real special permit thing. It had only it needs an administrative special thing, but no public hearing with public testimony and sort of that. So I have a feeling that's pretty much a done deal.
Some number of years ago, I can't remember whether it was just somebody's dreaming or whether somebody actually proposed some real plans, but there had been some ideas floated about building over the railroad tracks.
Yes.
Has that
Oh, yeah. I
gone
remember
away,
that.
or is that an idea that people still talk about?
Well, there's this organization, TRA, Transit Real Estate things and so on, whose job it is to sort of find money for the T by selling off property.
Yeah.
And this was a TRA project. They wanted too much for it.
Right.
They could possibly have interested Leslie. The only plausible purchaser for that, or a builder of a building for that, would have been Leslie.
That's when
Yeah.
it came up, when Leslie bought that building,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
and so Leslie went in another direction, and one of the reasons was that TRA was asking way too much. And honestly, it would have been very, very difficult to build anything on that anyway.
Yeah.
Amongst other things, it has to be high enough that the trains can get under it. And that would have meant that,
Smart move.
that the ground floor would have been above head height on Somerville Avenue. If you were walking along
Oh, yeah.
Somerville Avenue,
that right?
you would have a blank wall right next to you.
All right.
And the ground floor was really almost at first, one up. So there would have a lot of, and it would have blocked, the light for half a mile into Somerville and who knows what.
And
But
then you'd
anyway,
have
at
this
any rate,
train
it was a
under you.
very realistic, it was not a very realistic idea in the first place. I have heard that idea has come back to be built not in Cambridge, but just when you get far enough down Somerville Avenue so that you're in Somerville. Somerville will not give the developers any problems at all over any sort of a permitting thing. Somerville
Yeah.
desperately needs development.
Right.
And so that would be, if that goes there, then that just goes there. There's one more big project that I haven't even mentioned yet, which is the Hathaway Bakery building on
Oh.
Richdale Avenue.
Yeah.
Now, Richdale Avenue is the avenue that runs parallel to the train tracks, just on the south side of the train tracks.
Okay.
It runs basically from Upland Street, which it meets at an angle, over to Walden Street. And that block is filled, on one side it's just residential, it's residential area. On the other side, it is ex-industrial area, a couple of basically old factory buildings.
Very typical along railroad corridors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's already one of the two big buildings, the Payne Elevator Building, was converted about 10 years ago into condos, and the people that live in there love it. And now this somewhat larger, not much larger, substantially larger, but pretty big building, big lot, along the tracks has been bought, and the developers would like to put up another condo, residence building, along there.
Repurpose the building or tear it down and start again?
Well, that's part of where the debate comes in.
I think there's actually two big live items happening right now. Was there some approval from the Historical Commission to
Yes.
initiate a landmarking
Yeah.
study?
So there is a very active group of residents who are fighting this tooth and nail. And I think their primary gripe is that it's a big it does increase the density of the neighborhood quite a bit. But you can say about that what you will, but they're fighting this one on all dimensions they can, and one of the fights is to fight it through the Historical Commission. And so they, in fact, have convinced the Historical Commission now to initiate a landmark study for this Hathaway Bakery building. The developer's plans, was initially presented, called for preserving 3% of the old buildings, really not much more than the facade,
Right.
and then building a great big condo behind it. Yeah, I keep saying condo, a great big
Yeah.
building behind it. As they've come back over and over again, each time their plans have evolved a little bit, the percentage of preservation has gone up a little bit. So at the moment, it's 9% preserved and
Right.
91% new building. And who knows what it'll be next time. But at this last plan is the one that they showed to the Historical Commission last week.
Yeah, by
And
the
they-
way, when these landmarking studies go forward, the Historical Commission tends to do a really great job of these.
Yeah.
I actually, when they produce them, I save them. They're like little history
they're
books.
wonderful. Yeah.
They're just great.
Yeah,
you know?
actually, Charlie Sullivan did a preliminary study back when this thing first was, because this is actually the second step. They did a preliminary pre-holding period of 6 months, and
Yeah.
that will expire in January. And then this landmarking study will go for another year. During that period, they can't demolish the building.
Right.
But they can go ahead and apply for all the other permits.
Well, and that's actually relates to another item.
And
which
that's
is
right, there's
there's a zoning petition, I believe, also associated with this.
That's right.
That's now making its way through the planning board and onward too.
Right, so the zoning thing it's actually pretty simple. They simply want to change the zoning on that side of Richdale Avenue to the zoning, it's just be the same as the zoning on the
Both
other side of it.
sides. Yeah.
And that would be, a pretty big cutback in what the developers could do.
Yeah.
No, those are all big changes.
Yeah, and they're all, they all bring more people to Porter Square. And as far as I'm concerned, in itself, that's fine. That's good. We want more housing. We want more low and middle income housing in Cambridge. And what better place to put it than next to a red line stop?
Yeah.
That's right.
You know, not to get too personal here, but this weekend, I was thinking about, what was the last movie that was filmed in Harvard Yard? And I was walking by the laundry on Oxford Street, and it says Love Story was filmed here.
I
And
remember.
Love Story was the last movie that Harvard actually allowed to film on campus. So I went on Netflix and I looked at this, and Love Story is still there. Love Story was filmed in 1970, and you see Cambridge everywhere.
That's right.
And it is shocking to me to see how empty it looks.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
are very few cars. The houses are spread out. The construction is minimal. And this is 1970.
Yeah.
And it's a different city. I mean,
Yeah.
you recognize all the old buildings, but
Of course, they might have asked people
But
to
just
not,
stay out.
don't put your cars here. We're filming today, so
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to read too much into that. But it is great
Right.
seeing the street scenes back then. It's
yeah.
really
So
wonderful.
get that movie. It's
Back before I had a laundry in my basement, I used to go do my laundry up there so I could do my laundry at the Love Story laundromat.
yeah. I mean, it's still a snappy movie, but I cry at commercials, so I'm not a good judge of this. But it's still a tearjerker, and it's really a good movie for Cambridge people. But
Yeah.
I wish they had shown more Porter Square in it. 'Cause it's a really
Well,
nice.
Yeah, we'll have our day. It's admittedly, with Porter Square has always been sort of the forgotten square, and
We should document more
Cambridge.
of it before it changes again.
that's another good thing about the historical commission. You can find these wonderful old photographs of
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, back when there was the big was it an orchard or
Well,
a
there's-
nursery?
Yeah, there was the Rand Estate, which
The
was
Rand
Let me
Estate,
interrupt
that's
you
it.
for a
Yeah,
second
we're
because
almost
we only
done.
have
Oh.
a few seconds left. Do you want to tell people how to contact your organization if they want to join or?
Gotta go
certainly.
quick.
All right, so
Quickly,
the easiest way is to go to our website, which is portersquare.net, PORTERSQUARE, all one word, .net. I've noticed it's sort of been running slow in the last couple of minutes, but you'll get there, and that has instructions for everything else.
Excellent.
See you next week.